Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear students and friends, Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Shahid Hussain, and today we are going to discuss a very important propaganda device, and that is name calling. In one of my earlier video lecture, I have given an overview of all the 7 important propaganda devices. Today we are going to focus and we will be discussing important aspects of name calling propaganda. Name calling, giving an idea a bad label, is used to make us reject the idea without examining the evidence. This is according to Lee and Lee, 1939. So, name calling is insulting or abusive language referring to a person or group to destroy their reputation. So, it's a verbal abuse, negative labels, and symbols. These all can be used in name calling propaganda technique. This phenomena is studied by a variety of academic and other disciplines that study propaganda techniques and their causes and effects. Propagandists use the name calling technique to incite fears or arouse prejudice about a person, group, or set of beliefs or ideas. Furthermore, the method is intended to provoke conclusions and actions about a matter apart from an impartial examination of the facts of the matter. This is important aspect. So the purpose of the name calling is to go for the conclusions without observing the merits, the arguments of the communication of the issue of the matter, or an impartial overview and impartial analysis of the issue or the matter. It is a fact that the name calling technique doesn't appear much in advertising, probably because there is a reluctance to mention a competing product even by calling it a name. That is why we observe name calling technique in advertising to a very less extent, and it's very rare in advertising, though it can be used. Different companies, different organizations, they do use name calling techniques in a subtle way in their advertising, but this is very rare. Its use in politics and other areas of public discourse is more common. The technique of name calling is most frequently applied, most frequently employed within the political discourse in an attempt to negatively impact their opponents. This is very common in politics, as we all observe that politicians often resort to name calling during political campaigns or public events with the intentions of gaining advantage over or defending themselves from an opponent or critique. So we are the witness of name calling technique of the propaganda being used widely in the political scenario, in the political canvas. As cited by Severin and Tankard in their book Communication Theories, two current examples of name calling are terrorist and terrorism. These are very common examples of the name calling used nowadays in this contemporary era, or especially we have observed these terminologies, these name calling techniques during the last 2-3 decades. The fact is that there is no universally acceptable definition of terrorism, and an old maxim also tells us that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. So the definition is very dubious. The definition is not clear. Yet this technique of name calling is used widely in these sort of things, especially during the wartime propaganda. These sort of name calling techniques is very common. If you people have watched my video lecture on the types and the objectives of the propaganda, then I think you people will be very much clear that I've mentioned the different objectives as described by the Laswell, who done a great work on propaganda. So propaganda is very common during the war times, and name calling is the best technique used during the wartime propaganda, creating a psychological impact on the opponents and to win the hearts of the allies, to win the help of the allies, and to demoralize the enemies. Similarly, a lot of examples are usually evident in the political canvas of every democratic country in which political leaders are seen giving bad labels to their opponents. Wherever we are living, especially when we are living in some democratic country in democratic circumstances, we can easily observe the name calling technique being used in the political scenarios, in the political talks, in the political discussions, even in the political TV talk shows or the political campaigns. General semanticists point out that what we call a person will depend on our purposes, our projections, and our evaluations. Yet the person doesn't change when we change the label. So whatever the label we use, whatever the name calling we use, actually the person whom we are calling, whom we are name calling, that person will not change. That person will remain whatever he or she is. But the technique of name calling depends on our evaluations, on our purposes, and our projections. So it is very evident that whether a person is called a freedom fighter or otherwise, it depends on the viewpoint of the person assigning the label, or the side the person assigning the label supports. It means that we use the name calling technique to get some vested interests, or to get some benefits over the opponent, over the person whom we are calling the bad names or whom we are labeling in a bad way. So one very important aspect I want to share, that sometimes name calling can affect the destinies of the nations and millions of people. So we should be very much careful about the happenings on the traditional as well as on the social media, especially when we talk about this digital contemporary era. We should be very much careful because the social media is usually filled with the messages full of propaganda and having some definite objectives to defame the people and to damage the reputation of the people and to get some other vested interests at the local, national, or international levels. So we people must be very much careful, especially our youth should be very much careful because they use the social media more than the other generations. So these were some of the important aspects of the name calling propaganda technique. I hope you people have understood it. Soon we shall meet again with another video lecture. Till that time, take great care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.